It was supposed to be a safe place, 30,000 feet in the air. But for one young black mother, clutching her infant to her chest, it became a scene of public humiliation and violence. A flight attendant's hand struck her face in front of a stunned cabin. The sting of the slap was nothing compared to the crushing weight of the injustice. But what the attendant couldn't see, was a seismic consequence walking toward her, ready to rewrite the entire power dynamic in an instant. Her name was Amara, and in that moment, she was simply a mother. The gentle hum of the jet engines was a lullaby, and in her arms, her 6-month-old daughter, Imani, slept peacefully. This trip was a celebration, a visit to her parents to introduce them to their first grandchild. The faint, sweet smell of milk and baby powder clung to Amara's sweater, a scent of pure, uncomplicated love. She glanced at the empty seat beside her, a temporary void. Her husband, David, had been held up by a last-minute business call, but had insisted she and the baby board without him. "I'll be right behind you," he promised. She settled in, believing the biggest challenge of flight would be a possible diaper change. But a tension was already brewing. A senior flight attendant, whose name tag read Janice, had passed them twice, her eyes lingering not with warmth, but with a cold, unspoken judgment. She watched as Amara gently rocked the baby, her lips pressed into a thin, disapproving line. The ordinary sounds of the cabin, the chatter, the overhead bin latches, seemed to fade into a distant buzz under her gaze. Amara, focused on her child, felt a familiar prickle of unease but tried to dismiss it. She had no idea that the empty seat beside her was about to become the center of a storm, or that her husband's delayed arrival was a ticking clock, setting the stage for a confrontation that would soon escalate beyond anyone's imagination. The first sign of trouble was a sharp, pointed comment. "You need to keep that child quiet," Janice said, her voice cutting to the cabin's murmur. She wasn't asking. She was issuing a verdict. Amara's head snapped up, a defensive heat rising in her chest. Imani was still peaceful, only letting out a soft whimper. "She's not even crying," Amara replied, her voice calm but firm, holding the flight attendant's gaze. For a moment, it seemed that would be the end of it. It was not. Minutes later, as the plane reached cruising altitude, Imani began to fuss, overwhelmed by the pressure in her tiny ears. Her cries were not screams, but the helpless, grisling sounds of an infant in discomfort. Amara's hands moved quickly, a practiced dance of rocking, shushing, and preparing a bottle. This was the moment for empathy, for a helping hand. Instead, Janice returned, her posture rigid with authority. "Ma'am, I must insist. You are disturbing the entire first-class cabin." The injustice of the accusation was a physical blow. Amara's composure began to crack. "She's a baby. She's uncomfortable. I'm handling it." Her voice trembled with a mixture of fury and desperation. She could feel the weight of every passenger's stare, some sympathetic, some annoyed, all witnesses to her humiliation. Then came the ultimatum. "You need to take her to the restroom until she calms down," Janice stated, pointing toward the back of the plane. The demand was unthinkable, to confine a struggling mother and infant to a tiny, unsanitary bathroom. "That's not happening," Amara said, her voice low and final. She held Imani closer, a fortress of maternal instinct. The standoff crackled in the air between them. Amara's mind raced to David. Where was he? His seat was still painfully empty. He was supposed to be her shield, her partner in this. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Janice's face contorted with impatience. She reached down, not for the baby, but as if to forcibly take Amara's arm and make her move. Instinctively, Amara flinched back, raising her hand to block the unwelcome advance. It was a defensive move, but it was all the justification Janice needed. In a shocking, brutal flash, her own hand came up. The sound was like a crack of thunder in the hushed cabin, a sharp, open-handed slap across Amara's face. Time stopped. The baby's cries intensified. Amara's head snapped to the side, her cheek burning with a fire that was more than just physical. It was a fire of utter degradation. Tears of shock and pain welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. In the dead silence, broken only by her daughter's screams, she heard a collective, sharp intake of breath from the other passengers. And in that silence, a new sound emerged, the distinct chime of the main cabin door being opened and the sound of determined footsteps boarding the plane. The confrontation had reached its peak, and the entire aircraft was holding its breath, waiting for the fallout. The sting on Amara's cheek was a brand of shame, but it was a sound that followed that froze the entire cabin. A man's voice, deep and trembling with controlled fury, cutting through the static of shock. "Take your hands off my wife." Every head turned. There, standing at the front of the cabin, was David, but he wasn't the relaxed, smiling man from the airport. This was a different person. His eyes, usually warm, were locked on Janice with an intensity that could shatter glass. In his perfectly tailored suit, he seemed to radiate an authority that made the aircraft's hierarchy instantly obsolete. Janice, momentarily stunned, fell back on her script. "Sir, please take your seat. This passenger was being non-compliant and assaulted me." David didn't even glance at her. His entire world had narrowed to Amara's tear-filled eyes and the red mark blazing on her face. He stepped forward, his movements deliberate and calm, each footfall a drumbeat of impending judgment. He gently placed a hand on Amara's shoulder, a silent message. "I am here. The world stops now." Then he turned. He looked past Janice to the horrified senior pilot who had just emerged from the cockpit. He spoke, his voice low but carrying to every row. "Captain, my name is David Thorne. The documentation for my acquisition of this airline, Aura Global, is on your cockpit tablet. You can verify it now." The name Thorne landed like a bomb. Aura Global, the parent company, the owner. Janice's face underwent a terrifying transformation. The mask of smug authority shattered, replaced by a dawning, gut-wrenching horror. Her eyes darted from David's steely gaze to the captain's paling face, to the corporate logo on the headrest. The very symbol of the empire this man owned. The power she had wielded seconds ago was not just gone, it had never existed. She had not just slapped a passenger. She had assaulted the owner's wife, the mother of his child, in his own domain. In the ringing silence, David delivered the line that would seal her fate, his words not loud, but absolute. "This woman," he said, his eyes never leaving Janice, "is no longer an employee. She is your responsibility to detain until we land. The authorities will be waiting." The hunter had become the prey. In the days that followed, there were consequences. Janice was not only fired but faced assault charges. The airline, under David's new leadership, implemented mandatory, intensive anti-bias training for every employee. There were headline statements and a settlement donated to charities fighting racial injustice. On paper, it was a clean, decisive victory. But for Amara, the victory was more complex. The public mark on her face faded, but the private scar remained, a lingering flinch at sudden movements, a new wariness in crowded spaces. The incident became a dark story they would one day have to explain to Imani. Yet, from that humiliation grew an unshakable resilience. She and David used their painful platform to launch a foundation supporting victims of racial discrimination, transforming their trauma into a tool for protection. This story is not unique because of the dramatic power reversal. It is terrifying because the slap, the humiliation, and the prejudice are realities for countless people every day. In stores, on streets, in offices, where there is no billionaire husband to step in as a deus ex machina. The true horror lies in how ordinary Amara's experience was, right up until that moment of violence. So we are left with a haunting question. How many times has the same story played out, with the same cruelty but without the camera, without the witnesses, and without the power to force a happy ending? The justice in this tale is satisfying, but it is a fantasy. The real work begins when we realize that for every Amara who is vindicated, thousands are not. And that is a reality we must all be compelled to change.